This video is brought to you by Skillshare. Thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Hello, I'm Cass. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to a new reading vlog. This one is very exciting, and I know I say that probably in every single reading vlog because I'm always just so excited to be vlogging for you all. It's very exciting because I'm finally going to read my very first J.R.R. Tolkien book, and that book being The Hobbit. I know I'm probably gonna love this book. I actually started reading this back in like high school, made it perhaps halfway through, and then soft DNF'd it to one day return. Well, many years later, here I am, ready to return to the world of The Hobbit. While Katie was doing a reread of The Lord of the Rings, it made me really want to pick up the Lord of the Rings trilogy. However, I don't have time to do that this year, so I thought I'd dedicate some time next year to doing that, but I still wanted to read something by J.R.R. Tolkien, so I decided to pick up The Hobbit. This is the cutest little edition that I have ever seen, and you cannot argue with me otherwise. And the best part about this, too, is it has an itty-bitty map on the front and in the back, and I love it so much. If y'all don't know, I'm a fantasy cartographer, so I draw book maps, so seeing tiny book maps just makes my heart oh so happy. I love it so much, and I'm so excited to jump into this and follow Mr. Bilbo Baggins as he goes on his journey to do stuff. I have seen the movies, and I know a lot of people say that the book is better than the movies, and the movies are just too much, and da-da-da-da-da. Like, personally, I really loved the movies. I have to do a rewatch because I haven't watched them in like years, so maybe we'll get up to doing that sometime this week. But in the meantime, we are going to, of course, get started on this book, but I also have a few other books on my TBR as well. The next one being The Slow Regard of Silent Things by Patrick Rothfuss. This is another book that I started and soft DNF'd. Now that I think about it, that's not gonna be a trend in this video. These are, I swear, the only two books that I've soft DNF'd. And I actually was listening to the audiobook for this one on a long car ride home, and it was just a very slow and a little bit boring of a book for me to read while trying to stay awake on a long car ride. I do think I'll enjoy this novella. I just don't think it'll be like my absolute favorite. If you don't know, this is a novella in the Kingkiller Chronicles, and we follow one of our side characters, Ari, and she lives in the tunnels below the academy, and we get to kind of see how she lives and how she is as a character deeper than we do in the Kingkiller Chronicles. I don't remember how far I made it the first go around, so I'm actually going to just read the whole thing from start to finish. This is itty bitty, so that shouldn't be too much of a problem. And speaking of other itty-bitty books, I also have The Narrow Road Between Desires, which is another Kingkiller novella, and this is actually a rewrite of a book originally called The Lightning Tree. And in this book, I believe we're following Bast, another side character from the Kingkiller Chronicles, and I am quite partial to Bast. I really enjoy him as a character, and I really can't wait to see more of him, especially because we know so little about him. I'm just delighted to hop into this. So these are the two novellas I'm going to be picking up in this vlog. And then I also have a manga that I thought I'd throw in here because the cover is very fall-esque, and I think it'd be a perfect time to read it. I don't really know exactly what this manga is about, but it's one of my brother's favorite mangas, and that is Snow White with the Red Hair. As you can see, the cover is very fall-esque, and I love it. Apparently, Shiryuki is famous for her naturally bright red hair, and the Prince of Tambaroon wants her all to himself, but when she escapes into the woods of the neighboring kingdom, a young man named Zen and his two friends come to her aid. But who is Zen really? That's all I get. I really hope that I love it. If you don't know, Frieren, Beyond Journey's End is my favorite manga, and I'm always looking for mangas that just emulate the feeling that I got when I read Frieren, so hopefully this will deliver. This seems a little bit more action heavy compared to Frieren in the beginning. I suppose we'll see. I have heard wonderful things from some of you all as well about this particular series, so I'm excited to jump into it. I thought I'd, dive into at least the first volume in this vlog, give me some variety. So we've got a novel, two novellas, and a manga, and they're all itty bitty. and I love it so much. And I'm very, very excited to get into all of these. I'm actually going to start by picking up The Hobbit first. I want to make substantial progress into this book, and I also am just very, very excited about this book. And I still can't believe that after all of these years of loving fantasy that I haven't picked up anything by J.R.R. Tolkien, so I'm ready to rectify that situation. So let's go ahead, sit down, and get started reading The Hobbit. For about an hour and read, and I made it honestly a substantial way into The Hobbit. I'm on page 107, which is chapter 7. I just think this is the quaintest, coziest little book, even when all these terrible, high-intensity situations are happening. I just think the writing style lends itself very well to being a cozy fantasy, even though, like I said, so many things are happening where Bilbo is running for his life in severe danger. He's about to get eaten, killed, stabbed, cooked, burned, everything at once, but you're just sitting there like, oh my gosh, this is so cute. Like, look at the trolls bickering. Oh my gosh, like, this is so cute. Look at them fly away on eagles. I just think it is the quaintest little book. So whimsical, and the writing isn't as, how shall I say, old as I was expecting. Like, yes, this was written back in the 1930s. However, it doesn't read like typical classics would. I feel like the writing is very elementary, but in a good way, where it's easy to follow along and yet still fun and has a good use of diction. Big plus goes to chapter names. I want chapter names to come back in full force. One of my favorite chapter names was Out of the Fire and Into the Frying Pan. I love that phrase so much, and I like the song by Meatloaf by the same title. I just think it lends itself very well to the chapter in which it was titled after. It was them escaping from one thing and then immediately getting in hot shit the next corner. It's just been so delightful. Like I said in the beginning, I've seen the movies, so I know where the storyline is headed. There's minor tweaks. Honestly, I'm shocked at how minor some of these tweaks have been. So far, I feel like the movie really follows the book with, again, minor changes. Also, I'm really glad that in the movies they went away with everyone singing. Everyone was singing. I know there's still songs in the movies and people singing, but I swear every creature, every race that they encounter is just like breaking out into song and breaking out into song. They got captured by goblins and the goblins are like singing, and I'm like, what is going on? I really don't like songs in books, so I will say I have been skimming them. I'm just not the biggest fan fan of songs in books. Even like my favorite series, I tend to skim over the long pages of stanzas. Unless I open this book and it starts playing a merry tune, I could care less about reading the songs. So don't hate me for that. Let me know if any of y'all feel the same way. The only book series in which I've read the songs, Ranger's Apprentice, begrudgingly, but they're cute, and the Kingkiller Chronicles. But any other books that have songs, I'm like, all right, can we get a move on now? Lastly, a detail I wanted to note that I thought was so creative and I had just never really paid attention to, because I feel like they definitely brought it up in the movies, and that is moon runes. Basically, the dwarves invented moon runes where the runes will only show up again on the same moon that they were written on by like holding it up to the light, but it has to be a very specific moon. And I thought that was so creative and such a cool like world building aspect. Also, speaking of runes, anytime a map is mentioned, Bilbo's like, oh, I love a good map. I love a good map. Let me see that map. Oh my gosh, what's going on with this map? Runes, you say? Hand lettering? Let me see. I myself have horrible handwriting, but let me see that map. Bilbo was so real for that, because I too react the exact same way when I see a good map. I'm like, oh, let me see that map. So it's so fun to relate to a fictional character in that way. A fellow cartographer lover. Who would have thunk it? Overall, once again, it's just been a delightful, whimsical little journey that we've been taken on. Again, even when our main character is about to like kick the bucket, I'm like, this is so fun. Like, the writing is just so cute and so quaint and such a delightful time, even though our characters were one step away from being sat on by trolls. Also, I love how eccentric Gandalf is in this book. I feel like he's modeled that way in the movies pretty well, but getting to see a whole new level of just how kooky Gandalf is, I'm kind of here for it. Now, I don't want to just speed through The Hobbit all in one go like I almost did. I was a little too comfy on that chair. So I am going to switch over into one of my novellas. I'm honestly not sure which one of these I want to pick up next. I kind of want to read The Slow Regret of Silent Things because I think I'm going to like it less than The Narrow Road Between Desires, but I have the audiobooks for both of these. Now, my bestie Katie, she's big on puzzles and audiobooks. She says it's the perfect combo. I myself am not like a huge fan of puzzles, but relating to what I just said about loving maps, I recently went to Barnes & Noble and bought a 1,000 piece puzzle that is the Zelda map, because I was like, oh, this would be nice to put on my wall. And it would be really fun just to put together in general. But I unfortunately did not have a table to put this puzzle on and to put together this puzzle on until very recently. And yes, I'm about to talk about a harrowing journey of dragging a dining room table into my house. But let me set the stage for you. I did some grocery shopping and I came home and my neighbor, like diagonal from my backyard, had a full dining room table set out to get rid of. We don't have a dining room table. My favorite cost is free. So I set about dragging this table by myself because my roommate was at work. And it was quite the journey to get this table, this very heavy table, to my front porch, to then realize that it would not fit through my front door. I then had to disassemble, bring all the pieces in, and reassemble this table, which was still so heavy, but I did it, and I'm so proud. So we are going to put together this puzzle on said dining room table. I cannot wait, and I'm going to test out to see if the audiobook puzzle combination is the best combo. I still can't say that puzzles are my favorite things in the world. I tend to just want to be done with them. I am not one that typically enjoys the journey of putting together a puzzle. Usually I'm just like, can we be there already? But honestly, listening to the audiobook, I didn't realize I spent nearly 2 hours just doing the puzzle, and I managed to complete the border right as the book finished. So I feel like reading The Slower Art of Silent Things was just meant to be while I puzzled. It was so perfect. But oh my gosh, this puzzle is so hard. Everything looks the same. All the pieces are the same color, and there's like slight variance of color, and it all looks the same to me because I'm partially colorblind. So I was like, why did I do this to myself? But like I said, I completed the border, which is far more than I thought I ever would do today. I also finished The Slow Regard of Silent Thing, which is something I also did not think I would be able to do today. And I will talk about this in just a moment because I briefly wanted to go back to talking about the puzzle, and in particular, the art of just picking up cozy hobbies. While puzzling is certainly not for me, I feel like as we're approaching late fall, early winter, the itch to pick up more cozy hobbies is certainly there for me, and I thought what better hobby to pick up than crochet. It's been a few years since I've actually crocheted anything properly. The last time I picked up a crochet hook was just to like fidget while I was at Katie's, so nothing substantial has been made in quite a few years. But luckily with today's sponsor Skillshare, getting back into crochet was made super duper easy. Skillshare is the largest online learning community filled with thousands of creative classes led by industry professionals. There are certainly a plethora of things that these classes on Skillshare cover, from art, design, illustration, animation, and even crochet. It truly is a place built by creatives for creatives. In regards to crochet, I already knew the basic stitches, so I wanted to dive into something that I was a little less familiar with. So I took Emily's class, the Granny Square Crochet Masterclass, to expand my knowledge base of crochet. I love a good granny square because they can be made into practically anything, but I'm kind of rubbish at making them properly. Emily's class helped me take my slapdash approach to crafting granny squares to something a bit more refined. It's safe to say that guessing where my stitches are supposed to go is mostly in the past. If you're looking to pick up a new hobby, I certainly recommend Skillshare, and if you're not sure what hobby to pick up, don't worry, with their newest update, Skillshare has you covered on that end as well. When you sign up, members are asked to share a bit about their interests, and from there, Skillshare automatically recommends you classes specifically tailored to your goals. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will get a free 1-month trial of Skillshare. That way you can take a couple classes to see if Skillshare is the right fit for you. So thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and of course I want to thank all of you for watching and supporting me. It means so much. Now back to the hobby that I know quite a bit about, and that is reading. I don't have like the best things to say about The Slow Regard of Silent Things. I knew that this novel was not going to be my usual cup of tea, let's say, because nothing really happens, and luckily, when did my earring pop off? I cannot believe my earring fell off. How did that happen? I'm like baffled. I knew going into this book that not much was going to happen. It isn't like a typical story, and Patrick Rothfuss has like a foreword where he like forewarns you that this is a book unlike any other, in which case it's hardly a story at all. The things that I did get out of the story is just loving Ari so much as a character. She's such an interesting, uniquely broken soul, and getting to see her personality shine through from her own eyes versus Kvothe's point of view was just so refreshing, and she is simply too pure for this cruel world that she lives in. And I just love Rothfuss's writing. Truly, the prose that he uses and how he writes is just so magical and really helped elevate the experience. However, in terms of just the bulk of this story, it was fairly boring. I can't say that Ari is like my favorite character, but she kind of just peruses around and explores the underthing, which is the tunnels below the university. But we get the depth from her perspective, which is a little bit quirky and very unique. I ended up giving it a 2.75, unfortunately. I just don't think that this was aimed at me, even though I love the Kingkiller Chronicles. I understand there's an audience for this, and I was able to appreciate and enjoy the writing. It just fell so flat for me, and I was wanting just like a little bit more. It is quite funny that I say that though, because Rothfuss's post-word mentions that this is not a story for everyone. He says if you picked it up and didn't like it, sorry, it's not a story for you. So I guess I can just say that, well, it wasn't a story for me. I do really hope that I enjoy the narrow road between desires a little bit more than Slow Regret of Silent Things. I don't regret reading this by any means. It gave me, again, a new perspective, and it delved a little bit more into Ari's potential past through snippets. So that is very intriguing, and I'm wondering how this will reflect into when I do my reread of the Kingkiller duology, but I don't think I'm gonna pick up this tonight. I actually want to go and sit on the couch and read Snow White with the red hair, and I think it'd be kind of fun to dive into like 3 different types of reading within one day. The first one being when I sat down and read The Hobbit, the second one being audiobook while doing the puzzle, and the third is just reading a manga. I think all the different formats just really round out my day quite nicely. So I'm going to go ahead, sit on the couch, and hopefully enjoy Snow White with the red hair. Last night was so relaxing, so just tranquil, the perfect wind down, and honestly such a wonderful day too. I did so much reading yesterday. It was kind of crazy to be honest, but I did pick up Snow White with the red hair, and I also finished said book, and I also watched the first episode of the anime, and it's so freaking cute. I really want to continue watching more episodes of Snow White. We'll see if I do it or not. However, I do have the streaming service in which I can watch the anime on, so good news all around. I loved the art style and the voice actors, impeccable. But let's actually talk about Snow White with the red hair, the manga first. I ended up giving it a 4 stars. It wasn't necessarily my favorite manga that I've read so far, but it was so bloody funny. I was laughing at so many scenes in this book because it's just utterly ridiculous. The book starts off with Shirayuki being summoned to become the prince's concubine, and she's like, no thanks, I'm gonna pass on that. So she runs away from her kingdom into the neighboring kingdom, and that's when she runs into Zen, who is actually a prince of his own. You find out really early on, so I wouldn't necessarily say that's a spoiler whatsoever. And things transpire. They kind of end up liking each other and having an instant connection. However, they both have to forge their own paths, so they split up, and Shirayuki ends up forging her own path as a herbalist. And then the book follows on from there, how they're still kind of together but not sort of thing. I think the premise is cute. It's funny that she ran away from one prince to end up like falling into the arms of another prince, and the motivation behind her doing some things are definitely like girly for a man, hang on now. However, I really like Shirayuki's positivity and outlook as well as Zen. I think that they bounce off each other really well. The side characters that are Zen's bodyguards, Mitsuide and Kiki, are also a delight. They're a little goofy, as are like the palace guards that we get to interact with. We've been introduced to another character as well near the end, and I'm really curious to see what's gonna go down with everything. I don't know if I'll continue on with the manga per se. I will try to continue watching the anime. I guess it just depends on whether or not I can get the volumes from the library, because I'm trying not to collect any more manga. I've decided that Frieren and Orange were the only two manga I'm allowed to collect. I don't mind having first volumes of multiple different mangas. However, I don't want to have multiple shelves of multiple bits of manga. I do really, really love this cover though. I think it's so cute, and overall it was just a really cute and funny story that, like I said, I gave 4 stars. I did also read just a touch further into The Hobbit. I'm now on page 126, which is still in the middle of chapter 7. These chapters are incredibly long, and I still have many more pages before I get to the end of chapter 7. I don't really mind the long chapters though, because there's typically breaks in the paragraphs where it moves on to a new scene, so they're short segments in each chapter, but the chapters are long, if that makes sense. I also learned while I was on a FaceTime call with Katie reading this, I didn't realize that The Hobbit was like a children's story. That just kind of went over my head. I might have heard it somewhere and just it didn't register, but that really explains why the writing is just so fun and cutesy and whimsical, and even when really bad things are going down, you're still having a grand old time because it's a children's novel. So all the pieces kind of fell into place when I was talking to Katie last night. I was like, oh, okay. I'm still having a delightful little time with The Hobbit. I just read the scene with Bjorn, and I thought that scene was so unbelievably funny. I was cackling the entire time while these little dwarves kept coming down the path in pairs of 2. Just that whole sequence was just so delightful and so fun. I'm just having a wonderful, wonderful time reading The Hobbit. I think more so than I was anticipating going into it, but I'm not gonna look a gift horse in the mouth, that's for certain. I did want to do some journaling today though. I am severely behind on my reading journal. I haven't even finished setting up September. I haven't set up October, and it's already over halfway through November. So I thought we'd do a little bit of catching up today. There's no way I'm gonna get all caught up today. I don't have the time to do that, but I thought I'd at least catch up a few pages just so when I finally do sit down to try to catch up with the whole journal, it's not as overwhelming. While I'm doing that, I am going to start the audiobook for The Narrow Road Between Desires. I don't know how far I'll get into the audiobook. Honestly, reading The Slow Regard of Silent Things was so speedy. This one looks a touch longer, but it's also shorter than A Slow Regard of Silent Things, so it could potentially be the same exact size, which is itty bitty. So I don't know how long the audiobook is, but I feel like it's fairly short. So I guess I'll come back to you when I have an update. I've also really been enjoying listening to some new K-pop songs, so I might listen some to the audiobook and also jam out to my K-pop music a little bit as well. It is now the next day, and I once again have finished an entire book between the last time that I spoke to you, although once again, it is because these novellas are so incredibly short. The audiobook was only 4 hours long, and I listened to my audiobooks on 2x speed, so I was done in a jiffy. I also did the journaling in which you saw, which was so wonderful. And I took some time to obviously get a little caught up. Didn't realize how behind I was on my journal until I actually sat down to journal. I was astounded, and I'm still so far behind. I just don't really have time this week or the next week to work on it, so I'm not gonna catch up properly until Thanksgiving, which is fine. It means I can bring all my journal supplies back home to Texas and just relax and journal around my family, but as of right now, I'm too busy to do anything except for read and draw my commissions. Enough blathering on about that. Let's talk about the narrow road between desires, because this was truly night and day compared to the Slow Regard of Silent Things. Like I said, with Slow Regard, I found that it was incredibly boring, and while I appreciated the prose and Rothfuss's writing, I found it to be just nothing. It contained absolutely nothing. This, on the other hand, I loved so much. I ended up giving it a 4.5, I think, or 4.25. There was a few scenes that had me kind of quirking my eyebrows in confusion and a little bit of concern, but overall, once again, Rothfuss's prose are just so beautiful. He truly does have such a way with words, and I love reading his writing. I also adored getting to know more about Bast. Now, Bast is a character that we get to see a little bit in the Kingkiller duology, mostly because of how the story is told. If you don't know about the Kingkiller Chronicles, Kvothe is basically telling his story of his life to someone to write down, and so the only time we get to see Bast is in the present day timeline at the Waystone Inn as he's telling his story. We get snippets of him, and he's a very interesting character because we're not fully sure what he is. We just know he is not human, and this book delved a little bit more into potentially what he could be and the potential bits of magic that he may possess. I found him to be such an interesting character, and although I know I just said he's not human, I feel like this book humanized him a little bit more and gave him much more depth as a character. Seeing him try not to get attached to the people that he interacted with was just fascinating, and I loved it so much. It really was a story that didn't contain much in terms of action or any big battle scenes or anything like that. It simply was a story about life, and the way it was told was just beautiful and very heartwarming. I will say it definitely deals with some heavier topics, especially near the end, so definitely be careful if you plan on picking this up and you're sensitive to sensitive topics. I would definitely check to see if there's any like warnings in this book. I don't want to say what it's about because I feel like that kind of gives a spoiler. It was just a beautiful story, truly a beautiful story about life, and we got to see more about Bast, and I absolutely adored it. Reading rothfuss content that I actually enjoyed was so refreshing, especially new. Like I said, this was a rewrite of a book previously called The Lightning Tree, but I think he made it a little bit longer and tweaked up some of the sentences. Since I never read The Lightning Tree, I wasn't really bothered by this book because it's all new content for me, but I know a lot of people that read The Lightning Tree, picked up this book expecting something new, and wabam, it was just a rewrite of The Lightning Tree. Another reason I am so delighted that I finally read this book is because I actually put it on my 2024 TBR, which means I have another book off of my 2024 TBR checked off, and I feel a sense of vast accomplishment. And I love that for me. Now, the plans for today are very cut and dry. Right now, I actually need to run to the library to pick up a hold that came in. Coincidentally, it is another book that is on my 2024 TBR that I hope to read before the end of the year. And I also want to stop at Barnes & Noble because last time I went to Barnes & Noble, I bought volume 2 of Freyrin thinking that that would complete my collection. Turns out, I'm also missing volume 9. So I want to get volume 9. And I figured, you know, while I'm there, if anything else accidentally falls into my hands and I buy it, I'm not going to be too pressed over that. But that's typically how I go into my book shopping anyways. And then I plan to come home and finish The Hobbit. It is the last book that I have left in this vlog, and then I'll have to wrap things up. I'm very, very excited to finish The Hobbit, though I know there's many more adventures still to come, even though I'm only halfway through it. Like I said, still just a whimsical time. I have not read any more of it since talking to you last. I mostly focused on finishing the audiobook for this and then doing a lot of work. I'm going to go ahead and head out to Barnes & Noble. Returned from my book shopping ventures, and to be honest, I think a Barnes & Noble opening so close to the post office I frequent to drop off orders is going to be very, very problematic for my bank account because the book shopping was quite successful, perhaps a touch too successful. I'll go ahead and give you a little library haul as well as just a regular haul. This is my dragon tote bag, now available on my website in case you're wondering. Starting with the 2 books that I picked up from the library, the first one being the one I mentioned earlier, and that's the Jinbot Ashantapor. This is the book that is on my 2024 TBR that I'm still hoping to get to before the end of the year. I don't remember much about this other than I think there was a monkey. There was a small monkey bot named Bator, and that's our main character's brother. That's all I really know. And look, the monkey's right there. Look at the monkey. It's so fun. I just knew that this was sci-fi. I was trying to dive more into sci-fi. December for me is always like a really sci-fi heavy month. For some reason, I just suddenly get the sci-fi bug and all I want to do is pick up sci-fi. So I'm excited to pick this one up. I literally had never heard of it and don't remember how I found out about it. I don't know if it was Instagram or Goodreads or something, or if I just stumbled upon it, but I did put it on my 2024 TBR. Like I said, I am trying to do the best I can before the year ends, before I can get that sliver of serotonin and accomplishment that comes with, you know, successfully completing or coming close to completing something that is totally made up and totally unimportant in the slightest. But hey, let me live. The next book is actually an autobiography, and while I didn't know that this autobiography existed, it kind of makes sense that it does, and I've seen many clips of Yeonmi Park on YouTube and her telling her story about her escape from North Korea. It was something that really intrigued me, so I'm kind of excited to read about her story and just read about someone who is so clearly brave and resilient and finally understand exactly what her journey was like coming to America. As for my Barnes & Noble haul, I bought 3 books. I was unsuccessful finding Farron. I was absolutely heartbroken. I went over to the section and there was only like 5 books there. The grand opening, there was so many books, and I should have known that I was also missing volume 9, but I didn't know. And then another book I was looking for was also not there. And then another book I almost bought, but I had set back on the shelf to do another lap because I am just very indecisive, but I should know better. I should have held on to it instead. That book was In the Shadow of Lightning by Brian McCullen. And then by the time I finally swung back around to the fantasy section, it was gone. Someone had bought it and I couldn't remember the title. That was the worst part. I thought I wrote it down or put it on my Goodreads TBR list, and I was scrolling and I'm like, none of these are it. And I was like racking my brain to try to figure out what the book was called, who it was by, anything. All I could remember was the cover had red on it. There was like shattered glass. The series name had something to do with shattered glass, I thought, and I knew it was Blipped by Brandon Sanderson. That's all I knew. So I approached a bookseller and I said, there was a book in this spot and here is all I can tell you about it. And he was pretty stumped. And then another bookseller came over and I described the same thing and he was like, I know exactly what you're talking about, give me a second. And then he figured out what book I was talking about. They didn't have it in stock. Someone did buy up the last one, but I was able to add it to my TBR and not be so bothered about the fact that I couldn't remember the title. I just thought it was such an intriguing story. And I am kind of peeved that I didn't, you know, hold on to it to purchase it, but hopefully whoever bought it really enjoys the book and has a good time. And then the next time that I'm in Barnes & Noble, I can hopefully snatch up a copy for myself. But since I was unsuccessful in finding Farron, I actually picked up volume 1 of the Apothecary Diaries. This is a series that Bella from Throne of Pages recommended. I think she recommended the anime, but I kind of like this whole read 1 volume of the manga and then watch the anime situation I've got going on. Like I did earlier in the vlog, I started with, you know, Snow White with the red hair, and I'm gonna continue on that anime, and I'll probably do the same for the manga. I think collecting first volumes of manga is kind of fun to see if I like it, and then again, I'll watch the anime, because the anime I had heard of because I had seen, I think, Crunchyroll like commercials like promoting the series, because I think the anime came out recently. Correct me if I'm wrong. Of course, I want to try out the manga before the anime, and I thought this cover was super duper cute, and I love the green quite a bit, and I blame myself for being in the manga section and not wanting to walk away empty-handed. I couldn't have Farron, I had to get something else. And then the other 2 books are Brandon Sanderson novellas. I feel like this video has been nothing but mangas and novellas and anime and all of that, but it's fine. And that is Edge Dancer and Dawn Shard. These are novellas that you need to read in between some of the Stormlight books. I knew, okay, I didn't know. I knew there was one that came after Words of Radiance. I couldn't remember, you know, which was which. Google told me it was Edge Dancer. I figured since I'm nearing the end of Words of Radiance, I might as well go ahead and pick up Edge Dancer just in preparation. I don't think I'll be able to read Oathbringer until 2025, but I thought in the meantime, I would have the novella to read. I also love this pocket-sized book. Obviously, I feel like everything in this vlog has either been small or a novella or a manga. Like what is going on? I love it so much. I remember reading Mistborn Secret History and I had the book that is this size. It's just out of my reach. I'm not gonna grab it, but it's literally this size. And I remember the experience was so lovely. And even reading The Hobbit, which I'll get to talking about in just a second, was absolutely a delight in this like pocket-sized format. I actually don't know what either of these are about. And you know what? I'm not gonna check. I just know that they're part of the Stormlight archives and that I need to read them in a certain order. And I now own them. So that is my little Barnes & Noble book haul. I don't think I've bought this many books at Barnes & Noble in quite some time, because usually half price books is my go-to, but I just love this Barnes & Noble so much. It is set up like the newer Barnes & Noble, and honestly, I kind of prefer those, and I just really like the setup of this one. I'm able to do just so many laps. The vibes were so good. It was so busy there today. It was almost more busy than the day I went for the grand opening. It is a Saturday, so that kind of makes sense. I probably should have gone on a weekday versus a weekend, but regardless, I just love being around so many bookish people. When I was speaking to one of the booksellers, again, they're just so lovely. I had these in hand, and then we started talking about the Stormlight Archives, and I was saying how I'm almost done Words of Radiance, and he just kind of prepped me for what's to come for the rest of the series. He said Oathbringer is definitely one that you need tissues for. That worried the ever-loving goodness out of me, because what does that mean? I am already emotionally wrecked. What do you mean I'm gonna need tissues for Oathbringer? I'm not ready, but I'm also very, very excited. But I have a Stormlight vlog that will be coming out in which you can see me read Words of Radiance, so I'm gonna shut up about that and instead talk about The Hobbit, which is the focus of this video. The sun is setting, and it is now time to end this vlog and wrap up this vlog. So I just finished reading The Hobbit. I sat on the couch. My roommate was out, so I had the house to myself, which is always the best time. Truly, when you live with roommates, when they're gone, it's the best feeling ever. It's like a little treat. Finished The Hobbit. It was delightful. I enjoyed every little bit of this story. It was just such a cozy, wonderful little fantasy book. I love J.R.R. Tolkien's writing. It was just so delightful and always brought a smile to my face with some of the turns of phrases that he would use. I think they're so goofy, and it was just a beautiful story, and I love how it ended. I liked the amount of action, and suddenly we had a bit of betrayal almost, and some characters turning against one another, but everything worked out in the end. I particularly loved, this is like a minor spoiler for The Hobbit, but when Bilbo comes back to the Shire, it's been over a year, so everyone thought he was dead. So he comes back home in the middle of everyone auctioning off his things, and I forgot that detail. I know it's included in the movie, but I forgot that detail entirely. So when I was reading about it, I just kept giggling, picturing that scenario of you come back after this life-altering, harrowing, deadly adventure, and you're completely a new person, and then you walk home into the midst of like half your shit being stolen, basically. And I think it's so funny. Honestly, it gives me the vibes of a scene in Percy Jackson where people think Percy is dead and he comes home to his own funeral happening. Identical vibes, and I was absolutely living for it. I am just so delighted that I finally picked up The Hobbit. It got a 5-star from me. I don't think that I could possibly rate this any lower. It did make me very, very eager to pick up The Lord of the Rings come 2025. Just getting to experience this world in book format. Absolutely wonderful, and I know I've been gushing about this book and saying it's the quaintest and the coziest little fantasy read ever, but it truly is. I loved it to pieces. I truly, truly did. Now to briefly wrap up the rest of the vlog and the rest of the books that I had read. I read a manga, which was Snow White with the Red Hair. Ended up giving it 4 stars. I don't plan on continuing the manga, but I do want to continue the anime. And then we have the 2 Patrick Rothfuss novellas, which I'm so happy to finally get off of my TBR. This I had been in the middle of reading since 2023, like the middle of 2023. If you think about it, it actually took me longer to read than when I read The Wise Man's Fear for the first time. If you don't know, there was this running bit back in 2022 of will Cass ever finish The Wise Man's Fear, because it took me 9 months to finish because I just kept putting off finishing it. But this book actually took me longer. This took me over a year. It took me over a year and some change in terms of months. So I'm finally glad that I got it off of my TBR. Granted, I was super disappointed in it and ended up giving it a 2.75, but at least I've read it, so I know what it contains. And then of course, The Narrow Road Between Desires, I gave 4.5. Like I said, there were some few scenes that certainly had me questioning some of Rothfuss's choices, but of course, he has some of those scenes too in the Kingkiller Chronicles. I don't think too much of them. They're just a bit odd, I would say. But regardless, I loved getting to learn more about Bast and seeing him humanized and just understanding his character a bit more and expanding the world a little bit more as well. So here are the 4 books that I managed to read in this vlog. I really hope that you enjoyed hearing my thoughts about all of them. Please let me know if y'all have read any of these, especially the Rothfuss novellas. I would love to get y'all's opinion on these and see if y'all feel the same way as I do, because I know there's very mixed opinions when it comes to Rothfuss and especially his novellas. novellas, so I'm really curious to see what y'all think. I want to thank all of you so much for watching. I truly appreciate it more than I can ever express, and I really do hope to see you in the next one. Toodles!